Hello, guys. Welcome again to the Upriver Crawfish. I'm your host, Sankar. Today is October 2nd. I'm bringing you another Sitrep on the special military operations in Ukraine. It might actually change from special military operations to something more intense. But again, before I proceed, if this is your first time here, I'd like to give an overview of the map of Ukraine. So this is the whole of Ukraine. This is Crimea. The areas here, there was Russian troops in Kharkov, but in September they withdrew from that area. These are the Donbass areas. This is Zaporizhia. This is Kherson. A lot of things have been happening since the last time I updated you guys. So these four regions that were Ukraine before, so Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, have voted in a referendum to become part of Russia. And President Putin today presented to the Russian Parliament and their Supreme Court to ratify the treaties to bring these regions into the Russian Federation. After that, things are going to happen. But right now, let's go into the battle situation. Since the last time we talked to you guys, Ukraine has gone on more offensives, and the major area right now that's in everybody's mind is about Krasnyi Liman. The Ukrainians captured Krasnyi Liman. They put pressure on Krasnyi Liman, and they were able to capture it. So let me go into the map. Maybe I might actually bring in another map. So it is this area, Krasnyi Liman, is this area that we're talking about, that the Ukrainians over the last couple of days, I think by yesterday, the Russians have pulled back. They have pulled back to Crimea or Kremenia. The Ukrainians, I will show you guys another map. One of the things that they did to be able to affect this, instead of attacking in a frontal assault, they attacked several times in the frontal assault to take Yampul. So this area is Yampul, and then this is Krasnyi Liman. They attacked several times to take over that area, but that wasn't successful. So what they came from the north, came on the flanks, from the support and from the communications lines, and they attacked from the north, and then they attacked. They kept attacking from other areas here, but they attacked mainly from the north and came down and put pressure on Krasnyi Liman. The Ukrainians put a lot of men in this fight. It was estimated that they had about 6,000 men in this fight. And the Russians only had about 500 men. Mainly they were separatist forces with some Russian BARS units. The BARS are like National Guard units that were there, and they fought gallantly. But then there were pressure because the Ukrainians came from and put pressure from Zolotoye and from Yampul. There was a pincer movement from here. They attacked also from Dobryshivo. They attacked from this area, and they put pressure on those areas. So as a result, what ended up happening is that the Russians sent the forces from the Central Military District I think the 20th Army and the 50th Army, they came at the time. I think Friday night it looked as if to say they were coming to stabilize things and hold Krasnyi Liman, but they came too late, and they did push a little bit on the Ukrainian force attack and push them back a little bit. But then Ukraine, because Krasnyi Liman, as far as has been reported, Zelensky wanted this place captured. So he brought over forces from Siversk and Slavyansk, and they came and added more pressure on those guys. And so they made a decision that they would pull back. They pulled back from Krasnyi Liman and set up a line at a new defensive line at Krasnyi. Now, I will go ahead and move on to another map to give you a better view of what of how this took place. So as I pointed out to you guys before, right? This is in Krasnyi Liman. That's how things were. The Ukrainians, in order to attack Krasnyi Liman, they decided to actually, instead of attacking head on, they attack on the flanks, which is actually good. They actually started the attack from north. There was a place called Rikodub that they had taken over. They took Rikodub and then they created that huge ceiling into the Russian lines and were able to put pressure on Krasnyi Liman coming from Yampol area and then from Terny area. So the Russians were here in Krasnyi Liman defending it. They have formed a circular defense and they have brought forces down here to defend Krasnyi Liman. But the pressures, those forces came too late to do anything, to do much of anything, and they had to make a decision to pull back. With 500 men against 6,000 at the least, because the Ukrainians put more reserves in, even though they were getting killed, the Ukrainians put even more reserves in to be able to storm Krasnyi Liman. They actually managed to capture Yampol, and so the pressure came from both in the turning area, and it came all the way down to Zarechny, and from Yampol, they were about to encircle that unit. I know the U.S. media said about thousands of Russian forces. There were not thousands of Russian forces there. There were 500 Russian forces there, 6,000 Ukrainians at the least. And so that was like at a 12-1 advantage. And those guys held for a while. And late Friday, there was more forces came from the Central Military District, the 20th Army, and the 50th Army. They came and rescued those guys. At first they managed to push back a little up here and push Ukrainian forces back a little bit from Zarechny. That was the last line here to Krasnyi to get them out. They were able to push up a little bit, but they realized, the defense in that area wasn't going to hold in much longer. So they did the smart thing, the tactically great thing. If you're not in a good position, you need to pull back. These actions that the Ukrainian did is what you call the turning movement. Turning movement means the person is about to flank you, so you need to turn and leave that area to fight another day. So they pull back. Now, there's a couple of things though that I don't understand, that granted the Russians don't have a lot of men power, and they're going to rectify that now that certain political decisions have been made. But I still wonder why the Russians not using a lot of their TOS military, because they toss one York, that toss one artillery, because that artillery in these situations where you have massive troops in forested areas, I would think those are going to be very useful. Those are where you would then bring those to bear and you can burn a lot of them, because that weapon is devastating. Especially since these guys are not, they are coming on the attack. They're not sitting in, they're no longer sitting in the trenches. They're coming on the attack, and they're coming in waves. From what I've heard, they have come. They often will come in waves of men in what the Russians call a chain, and they get killed. But more of them will keep coming, and so I don't understand why the Russians didn't use that artillery to devastate them and push them back. Another thing is, I don't understand also why the Russians waited too long to be able to defend this area. So that is some a fault of somebody, and their conversations with recriminations going on and whatnot. But yeah, this is something that the Ukrainians wanted to do from a political standpoint. And yes, it does have it makes a loud noise, especially coming to considering the fact that the Donbas republics Putin just accepted those republics in Russia. So this is Russian territory now. Nevertheless, Liman itself was not a strategic area. So where do the Ukrainians go from here? They got two choices now. They can push on Krasnyi, and if they push on Krasnyi, they might be able to take Krasnyi. Maybe the Russians might pull from there again. It just depends on what the Russian goals are. Sometimes, to be frank, I don't understand it. Or they could push towards Zolotoye. Now, Zolotoye, it has a huge Russian logistical section. So to seize Zolotoye will be tough, because what that will do is that then is at least at the minimum operational success it will be, or it could be a strategic success, but mostly operational. So they could push up this route and go try to seize Zolotoye, or they could move to Krasnyi. One of the things I'm noticing is that paper that a U.S. I think he was a captain or a major, Fiore, who wrote that because the battalion tactical group is short of infantry power, so Ukraine should send forces fighting them should send a lot of troops to their flanks and try to hit at the communication lines instead of attacking it head on. And that way, when you threaten the communications line goes and go towards the rear, that will put pressure on the command center and put them in the bind. That is what I'm noticing that is happening now. The truth be told is they tried to do this in Kherson before. Russian troops, regular Russian troops were there, and it didn't succeed. Now they've tried to do it here, and it succeeded in Krasnyi Liman. Did it succeed because of the skill in which they executed, or the amount of manpower they brought to bear, or did it succeed because the Russians just didn't want to put a lot of men in there yet? There's some decisions that are happening in this war. I don't know what to say about it. Not part of the Russian general staff, but there are things they are playing operations that coming. Things going to get hotter, and the Russians hopefully they're going to fight this war without and putting their own hands behind the back. For some reason, I mean, it's admirable, but I don't know who's watching or listening. For some reason, President Putin likes to do everything in with legal cover and legal justification in a legal fashion. So the Russians tie their own hands behind the back, and the Ukrainians taking advantage of it. So hopefully that will stop at some point in time. So let me move on to the battle in Kherson now. So after the success in Krasnyi Liman, the Ukrainians attacked on 3 axes in Kherson. So far, they have been losing a lot of men in Kherson for very little, if anything, gains. But today, they managed to press along the Dnepr River and able to seize, I think they said, about some 30 kilometers of territory in an area called Zolotoye Balka, right along here in this line. And they have been pressing on that for a little while. The Russians pull back from that area to a better defensive line. And so this area they've been pressing on. Their goal here is probably to go along the Dnepr River, to move along the Dnepr River to Kakhovka. They've been attacking that bridge over Kakhovka, as you remember, with the MLRS, and then finally to seize Kherson. So what are the Russians going to do to seize this area? One of the things is the Russians, the general staff, I would say, are very calm, and that's what professionals are. They don't seem to, get too rattled. But some of these victories that Ukraine is having, I know the Russians are not really fighting them, but some of these victories that Ukraine is having is giving them, some hope or morale boost, and that can be infectious. Now, how far is going to go when Russia decides to fight and fully? I doubt it's going to go anywhere, because it's not really skill they're using here. They're using a lot of manpower and wasting a lot of men in these attacks, but they have the manpower. That's what they have to their advantage. So Russia needs to bring their own forces to bear and put enough Russian forces here. From what I've actually learned now, just lately, to be frank, all through this war, apparently, the Russians along the lines, since they move over to the east and focus things in the east, they have really just been, at any one point in time, around 60,000 or so men have been helping on with all this all along this front line, with mostly the separatist units doing most of the fighting, and the Russians behind providing artillery and stuff like that. Russia has more manpower than that, so it is them just keep holding their own self back for some deal. That's another thing for folks who are pro-Russian. You're going to get frustrated because Vladimir Putin got this thing where he likes deals. He likes he likes deals. He show you that he can do certain things, and then make you decide, okay, let's settle this thing here in a gentlemanly way. And it goes back to a documentary. A documentary I saw shows that this goes back to when he was little. He said he pointed out that he doesn't like to put people. He liked to always leave a way out for people to be able to save face and come out. And it goes back to a story told about he was chasing a rat in an apartment building, and he cornered the rat. And when he cornered the rat, that rat turned around, had nowhere to go, turn around and chase him, and the rat would not let go. The rat went after him. So since then time, he has never liked to corner people. He has always liked to give them a way out. The only thing is, the people he's dealing with, they will always see that as a weakness. So this war need to start being fought properly. So far, I will say the Russians have been brilliant in their execution, and they wanted to do it on a small piecemeal basis. But they actually succeeded. Almost all of Ukraine's original weapon in the military, the original weapon is gone. About half of the original and standing military, they had 265,000 men standing military, that's gone. The reserves, they probably brought in their reserves to fight, and then with about the remainder of the half, and then they actually mobilized and add more men. But those guys, there are very few trained combat troops that are left for this battle, and most of the other people are territorial defense folks, the original reserves before, and they're not as trained. Even if they're as trained, the Russians can deal with them. And so basically the Russians had eliminated all of Ukraine's combat power that they had before the war. It's the US that keeps pumping them up and stuff like that. So brilliant. But now that the US is going to keep making the war go on and try to use Ukraine's manpower advantage, Russia needs to now fight this war properly. I think they are doing it. I think they will go ahead and do it. So that's the situation in the Kherson region. And then I would touch a little bit within the Donbass, the South Donbass area. You got the Wagner group. They're still going slowly. They're pushing towards Bakhmut. This is Bakhmut again, or what we call Archimovsk. They're pushing towards Archimovsk. That's you got the Wagner musicians that are doing that fight, and they're pushing in. They are actually in a lot. This map is pro-Ukrainian, so it's not showing that Wagner is already closer to Bakhmut than this is showing. But that's what's happening on that front. So we're going to see how the Russians change things. As President Putin stated, they have not even started yet. And I believe it that the Russians can bring more to bear in this fight. For one thing, they did not even bring in and using a lot of their TOS. They're not bringing and using a lot of their Terminator. They just now are bringing in. They haven't up to now, but we see a lot of the T-90s coming in and being moved to Crimea and coming from Russia. So hopefully they're about to execute this thing a lot more the way how they should. and be able to smack the crap out of Ukraine. And here's the thing. With those on a tactical level, those weapons. So let's take, for example, you take the Terminator, you take the TOS, and then you take the tank. So how I would deploy it, I will have the Terminator ahead because of that rapid fire and from his cannons. I'll have that ahead, and that's, as far as I know, that's how the Russians do it. I would then have the tank back, maybe offset to the back of the Terminator, firing from there, because the Terminator is rapid fire, will be able to discourage infantry from planting to fire anti-tank rounds. And granted, those Western anti-tanks are useless, have been useless so far, but it will at least put their heads down that they cannot do much. Then the tanks behind will fire, and the tanks can touch them from very far and blow up whole areas. But even before then, behind the tank, you will have the TOS. That TOS will lay waste to anything in that area before those tanks go over. And that would make this fight go a lot faster. And it will wreck Ukrainian military pretty quickly. But we'll see if the Russians employ that. Right now, they got their hands being held and fighting this war with one hand, and not even their dominant hand. So I think, from what I'm hearing, President Putin, after these republics get brought into the Russian Federation legally, he is going to then give an ultimatum to Ukraine to pull back. And if they don't, then he's going to do something. Then hell is going to break loose. That's what I'm hearing. Now, there are also options too, with Ukraine pushing all those guys into Kharkov. That means their lines could be overstretched, right? All those guys that came and took Kharkov, so what? Some about 30,000 men that came in this area to seize Kharkov, right? So that's about some 30,000 of their strong troops. These guys will be holding a lot of positions along here because they don't want those guys the Russians to move to take over those Kharkov, especially within the Kupiansk area. So they're still fighting there. Russians can come with a bigger swoop again from Kharkov. They would then have to decide. Russians can launch from different areas. They might even go back to Sumy and Chernigov, and even Kharkov, even Kiev, because now with a lot of those forces moved here that the Russians have made stuck in Kiev. I don't know how many of them are in Kiev right now, and so the Russians can bring a lot of forces to bear. And then the Russians can also bring forces to bear in the south and push more towards Odessa. But my bet is also they're going to come here to seize the rest of Zaporizhia and complete the takeover of Donetsk first. But that's what I think will happen. Now, who knows what the Russian general staff is thinking? But that's how I think things are going to go. Now let me go now and show you some stuff from the tail of the telegram. All right, this here is a tank battle with a Ukrainian tank T-64, I think BV or something like that, and then with a Russian T-80 tank. And the Russian tank moved up and smoked the Ukrainian tank. It's only showed what happened to one tank. I don't know whether the other tanks bogged out or not, but take a look. So these are the Ukrainian tanks. Well, this one here looks like it's disabled. So there was this one Ukrainian tank. Now that I look at it, it looks disabled. So this one Ukrainian tank. First, they were fired at it. It pulled back. The Russian tank moved, and so it decided to move in for the fight as well. And the Russian tanks fired point blank on it. Smoked the crap out of it. So 2 Russian tanks. And you see the formation that they were in. There's this tank, the tank that fired, with 2 other tanks with 1, 2, 3 tanks behind it. And so, in this position, the tank forward, if we were to bring the Terminator, I would say would be ahead with a tank offsetting it, maybe say on this left or right, offsetting it behind, and then you got the TOS one behind it. So that's that. All right, this one here is a clip of Wagner musicians, Wagner PMC musicians plying their trade, carrying on some orchestra in Donbass area. So somewhere in Donbass around Bakhmut. And let's take a look. So this, a cornet or a Metis M. I think it's a cornet. So they're taking out some firing positions.
Красава, красава, в балкон.
If someone was in there, well, they knocked them out. All right.
Балкон попали, пацаны.
Putting another.
5-й этаж, балкон.
Putting another
Давай.
ATGM up there. I have to say, man, the Russians, their weapons are made for combat.
Давай, родная, давай.
They are rugged. They make sense in how you deploy them. I mean, whoever was in there, they destroyed them. So, this year, as I pointed out before, this is just a few. I mean, there are a lot of video clips with the Russians bringing in more weapons and stuff like that. This is just a few of them. This is coming towards Ukraine. And remember, the Russians haven't started yet, and you better believe them. So there's a lot of weaponry coming, a lot of anti-aircraft, a lot of tanks, and they're bringing in some of the newer tanks now. The T-90, the real battle weapons. So the Russians can ratchet up this thing, and it will be good for them to do it soon. I mean, this is extreme confidence at another level, I gotta say. Where you decide, or we'll fight these folks with one hand behind the back, even as they try everything, even terrorism. They have started resorting to terrorism, and still you fight them, give them a chance to save face, and they still don't want it. Russia can do a lot more. So I mean, that's extreme confidence, I gotta say. So Russia is going to war. They ain't playing. And as President Putin said, and this I will touch on in another piece, specifically on the mobilization and the referendum. As he said, those regions have returned to Russia forever. And if he's saying that, I think he means for that to happen. So he's not playing around. So it will behoove the Ukrainians to sit down and talk. Otherwise, they will lose more territory. Now, as I told you about the TOS-1, Solsimyok. Yeah, I don't know. That's how I pronounce it, Solsimyok. This is the type of damage it can do. And I believe this is one. Make sure you pay attention to see human body parts flying when this thing go about. This is a bomb. It's a thermobaric weapon. That it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to hit you with shrapnel, right? It sucks up the oxygen in the air. And, you know, the US sometimes call it vacuum bomb, but it blows you up from inside as well. It turns the air around into fireball. So even if you are hiding in a trench, if it lands around there, you're going to be in trouble. So this is it. See that devastation. This is human body parts flying. Now, imagine that you have waves of men coming and you have several of those firing. I mean, they're just going to be turned into jelly. Anyway, that's it for this Sitrep. Please like, share, subscribe. Please help me out so that I can be able to produce more content and even get better at this. All right. Thank you. Hey, thanks to the trolls as well. By all means, you guys, please come. I welcome you. Thank you. Sankara out.